Hello everybody, my name is Craig Bennett and I'm the founder and owner of TechViews Nope, and today I'm going to answer a quick question with a somewhat detailed answer. And today's question is how do jammers work? And I'm going to attach a disclaimer right now since, the obvious. If you use this information for illegal or immoral reasons, then I have no part of that. This is just a purely educational video. So if you want to use that for whatever, then like if you want to use it as a home experiment, a short range jammer, fine. Check the laws first, but fine. But if it is illegal, if it's moral, then it's not on me. It's purely on you because I didn't force you to do anything. I'm just giving you the base knowledge. Now, as far as how to make a jammer, I'm not going to show you that. Not because of whatever. It's purely because I don't have the money for the equipment. And you got to keep in mind, I got to have the equipment not only to make the jammer, which is pretty cheap. You can make one for like $5, $5-10, something like that. Given Radio Shack's going out of the way, might be a little bit more now. But then you're going to have an actual device that the jammer jams. So that second device is going to be a little bit more, and I'll have money for both of that. But anyways, let's jump into a quick personal advertisement, and that way you can help make this channel better, and you can make it better quicker than I can never do on my own. Welcome back. Now, as far as a visual representing, I'm going to be using this water graphical thing to kind of help me explain how a radio frequency jammer works. There is several types of jammers. Now, I'm trying to include all of them I can think of. But as far as things goes, I figured that this is going to be a lot easier than basically doing on paint or whatever. But anyways, so as far as radio frequencies, they're kind of like ripples in the water. What you have is, say for example, in the middle of each one of these ripples is a house or cell phone tower or whatever it may be. And if you have a device, they can easily see which ripple is where, because as you see here, you can tell where's the center of all the ripples, even if the ripple has another one that's went right through the middle of it, or even 2 or 3, which is fine. Now the problem is going to be when you actually go and have a jammer in there, and what a jammer will do for this instance, it would actually push out a bunch, and keep in mind this has to be on the same frequency, and also it has to be very powerful, or at least more powerful than the sources. So what's going to happen is the jammer will come down, and because it's so powerful, you won't be able to see where the original source is. Now, this is kind of a poor example, but I mean it's the best I can do for visual examples. But basically what happens is, for a radio frequency jammer, they are more powerful, and it's location based. So military grade jammers, let's just talk about that for a second. I'm not going to show any pictures of that. That's like a box. Military grade jammers, and they're huge. They're bigger than a truck. The reason why they're so huge is because they're meant to cover something the size of, say, New York City, or maybe a couple blocks, something like that. And that's important because you need to have it super powerful to cover a lot of area. You can use a pocket held jammer to cover nowadays maybe a building. I don't even think you can get that. A couple rooms maybe. It depends on what exactly you're using and the size of the building and the things in between. But anyways, basically you need something powerful. That's the reason why military grades actually run off diesel engines. Very, very important. But pocket L jammers, they have them, and they're very cheap, and you can make one that jams up to, say, 10, 15, even up to 30 feet easy with no interference between. So what happens is you got much more of a powerful wave. Can't really think of another word, but you got much more powerful frequency, or not frequency, but wave. And basically what happens is it overtakes. Now the problem with this is it's very easy to figure out the source of it. So like, say for example, I got a couple ripples here and there. It might overtake some of them, but as far as that goes, if I would say the FCC, I would know where the source of this one is very, very easily. Now that's very important to note, because depending on how weak the outside sources is depending on how strong your stuff has to be. So say for example, if someone already has this one bar, it takes virtually nothing to jam their signal, either through a physical thing or through a radio wave like this. But as far as if their signal is pretty strong, it takes a bit to jam them, and that's the problem. And that's one thing that the FCC's pretty much made clear. The FCC is what is regulating all of this stuff in the United States, saying what you can and can't do with radio frequencies and stuff. So the problem is say for example, I want to jam a school or a office or a bank or something like that. Say I want to do something like that. It's that little dimple right there. There's no way for me, just like a ripple in a pond, there's no way for me to control where that radio frequency begins and ends without fine-tuning this stuff. And even then, there's no way, because I've literally seen it where wind can actually carry radio frequency, where a wind gust can automatically make something go at full bars, and when the wind goes away, it goes virtually nothing. I've seen that, and you see that on NASA. You see that all the time out there. Now, as far as that goes, that means that if your stuff is a little bit too powerful, you're jamming too much. So, say for example, if I wanted to rob a bank, just hypothetical situation, because the thing I'm thinking about is the Payday game that has a jammer in there. And one of the problems with it is, all right, let's say you're robbing a bank. A car drives by and it goes within that range. If it's on the same frequency as far as what it's looking for, its stuff is jammed automatically. So it roads by, hey, I lost signal. And cop comes by, they lose signal if it's on the same frequency. And cop's gonna notice. Cop's gonna try to figure it out. Person might not. Maybe. It depends on the person. So that's the problem. And on top of that, if I want to jam signals in a warehouse so people stay off their phones and go to work, then I have a problem. How do I control where it doesn't go outside of the warehouse? You kind of can't with this method. Now, there is banks and other things that do jam signals inside of a building, and I'm going to show you how to legally do it. Obviously, you need to check in your area for the laws. But anyways, as far as that goes, let's talk about Faraday cages. Faraday cages look like this. Here's a cheap example of that. In fact, you can do it at your own place. You probably already have something like this that you can use as a Faraday cage. So, as far as a Faraday cage, try to find something that's a little bit better. It's just basically a screen of some type around a box. The bottom of the screen usually doesn't have anything, but it is mandatory. If you want it to work, the top and sides have to be covered. Faraday cages are also used for things like electricity, basically. Just quick tidbit. If a lightning hits your car and you're not touching any plastic, your car is a Faraday cage. But for jamming wise, it's kind of not. So basically what happens is the radio frequency, like electricity, because keep in mind, if electricity has a hard time going through it, radio frequency basically can't go through it, so or has a much harder time going through it, depending on the substance and how things are. And that's an important thing to note, because what happens with a Faraday cage is the radio frequency, unless if you're like in a building, you need to have all sides covered. So for this example, it's probably on the ground, so there's no radio frequency coming out of Earth, but there's radio frequency coming from tops and sides. So that's all you really have to block in order for it to work. And what some banks use is a Faraday cage. Not many of them. There's been legal arguments, not actual put in practice, but banks actually asking this question with jamming radio frequencies for whatever reason, and some of the banks are saying, oh, it's for safety reasons. So if basically some banks, they don't have windows that allow you to see directly in, so you don't know who's where, all the positions and all that other stuff. So what you'll have is in some heist, people go in, look at stuff, and tell other people, okay, it's good, it's as we plan or whatever, and they start their thing. If you put a jammer in there, they can't tell their people unless if they walk back out, and then that situation might change, because keep in mind, second by second, it's a very dramatic thing. And on top of that, if someone's outside, say for example looking for the cops or something like that, then they can't communicate with the person inside. Say, hey, you need to get out of there, the cops are coming, yada yada yada. They can't communicate, so therefore you're gonna have problems. Some banks use that as an excuse. Some companies, warehouses mostly, and banks also use productivity so people, aren't looking at their phones, and you get more people through the line. Plus, on top of that, you can get the person behind the desk actually doing their job instead of looking at Facebook and stuff, doing time theft. So that's where that argument comes in play. And the FCC has basically told those companies, you cannot use radio jammers like this. You have to use a Faraday cage. And basically, the reason why is, again, because you can't control exactly where that jammer starts and stops if it's not an actual physical thing, concrete, Faraday cage, or whatever it may be, lead or whatever. And that's important to note, because you don't want to jam the person going down the street. You don't want to jam cops radio, so on and so on. You just want to take out certain things for whatever scenario you're looking at. There has been cases where there's been, I wouldn't call it complete jammers, but something that doles down signals. I'm not going to get too much into that, but basically that's just overpowering it just a little. Again, if the source is putting out very little power, it doesn't take too much to take them out. But if you just want to dole down their signal, so you knock someone down from 4 bars on a cell phone to say 2, then you can use some type of jammer to basically dole down their signal, and the person will be dropped a bit, or have a hard time communicating back and forth. Now, as far as that goes, I don't have it listed, but EMI, that's also an example of jammers. So EMI, basically what happens there, electromagnetic interference. So radio waves can also be considered with this. If you have old headphones, and we're talking about real old or cheap, then what you can probably do, or some wires or whatever, what you can probably do is take a cell phone or whatever, do whatever like you normally would to get it to transmit, and try to listen to music when you're using the headphones or doing whatever. What will happen is if it works, it's not going to work in all scenarios, because if the wire is good enough, because it's very cheap, so even if you have a cheap thing, it doesn't guarantee you that this will work. Basically what will happen is you're going to hear a couple beeps or a buzz and stuff like that, and it's so much of a problem in some situations that it actually powers on devices, very low voltage power on devices, or to tell a device to do something. So an example of this is a doorbell. So there's been scenarios, many scenarios out there where you have a doorbell, someone has a doorbell and the garage door opens, or a light turns on and off, or something weird like that. A wireless light turns on and off, or something like that. And how to fix that is put foil around the wire for a doorbell. And what happens is somehow the frequency coming out of the wire, or maybe whatever device, it is actually putting out the same frequency that your garage door opener uses. There's been scenarios where fighter jets fly over. Their frequency uses the same thing as like garage door openers, and they open up the garage every time they fly over. I remember talking to someone about that a while back. Many other things, fighter jet fly over and your doorbell goes off. There's plenty of things like that, plenty of examples out there. And in fact, some people think it's a goose hunting them and stuff. No, you just write the thing in foil and boom, you're done. It does take a little bit of troubleshooting to get down to, but yeah. And that's a huge thing to keep in mind. And same thing with turn on and off light switches. And that's a huge thing to keep in mind. I remember hearing one scenario where some guy, or some old woman, that her husband died. Some reason that they changed their doorbell shortly, like a month or two after the husband died. Some reason whenever she turned on the light in her kitchen, the doorbell went off. Well, it turned out to be it's the EMI. She thought it was ghost. So the only fix to that is wrap the wire with foil, and it went away. It completely went away. So that's another thing of jamming, because what you're doing is you're overpowering something. And say, for example, if you're listening to music or something, this is the best example I can think of. If you're listening to music, basically what will happen is you hear, instead of the music, you hear the beep or the buzzing or whatever it may be. And that's basically the EMI interference. Now, as far as, and I, again, seen it where you have devices that are very low powered, like speakers for a conference thing, and they will keep doing something. If someone got a cell phone in the room, the thing will keep buzzing even though the phone's off, because the thing's just looking for some little bit of power and trying to do that. So that's a huge thing to keep in mind, is that's another type of jamming. That's more accidental jamming, and that's, again, going to the side, but you'll still see that once in a while, especially with older technology, because it's not protected. So when you buy devices, specifically headphones and stuff, one thing to look for is, honestly, like super cheap, is EMI protected. If it's a very expensive headphones, very expensive speaker system, home speaker system included. EMI protection. It's very important. In fact, another thing is just the I've personally seen this. I got a wireless system outside, cheap wireless system outside, and if fog goes through, the thing buzzes like crazy, because even that little bit of static in the air, that little bit of whatever, especially if it is a lot of static outside, the thing will go off like crazy with the buzzing and stuff. And that's an example of jamming, because you're taking, if it was getting a source, you're basically blocking it and putting in your own thing, either on purpose or on accident. So as far as that goes, again, check the laws if you're going to play with this type of stuff. It's not a joking matter. You can get, in the United States of America, you can get major fines. And we're talking about like $15,000 fines, $10,000 fines, stupid high fines. There's been cases where an old woman, I think it was on Arkansas, I can't remember, it was a couple of years since I've seen this article, but basically, old woman, she had a light bulb on her porch. A light bulb, even though it's sold in the store, she didn't modify it. It was a fluorescent light bulb. It was putting off a certain frequency. Messing with some guy that driving by his AM radio, called in, said, "Hey, this ain't working." And yes, there's places that use AM radio, and we're talking about a lot of America it's like that. It's a lot of space between cities, and we're talking about hours and hours before you even see another car. But anyways, when it happened is a guy called it in, doing this thing, or there's scenarios where a mechanic in the shop is trying to listen to the radio and calling it in, telling the FCC, "Hey, run into problems." The FCC traced it down to the old woman. She got a major fine just because the light bulb was putting off a frequency that jammed the radio in the passing by car. So it's very important to note this, and it's not a joking around thing. It's definitely not a joking around thing. In many countries, you can actually realistically face terrorism crimes if you mess around with this in a negative way. Now, of course, if you're doing like a Faraday cage and stuff like that, that's another thing. You check the laws on that. But with the radio, if you're doing the radio type of jamming, putting off a high power, that's a huge thing to keep in mind. And that's where you're going to hear noise when you're getting the Wi-Fi noise. That's where you're going to hear it. Is the a lot of people say your stuff is putting off too much noise. That means you need to lower the power down so it doesn't interfere with their stuff. Somehow lower it down, or get a lower quality antennas or something. You ain't gonna hear too much about that unless there's a lot of people and they're all tracing it back to you. And it's a matter of probably less than 20 seconds to figure out who's doing it. So, or at least tracing it. It takes longer to get to the person than to and them being across the room than to figure out where's the source. Because all you do is you take two locations, you set up things looking at it, it looks at the power level, and it says, oh, it's there, it's a triangulation. So, or even better yet, if you got a third one, then there you go. But anyways, as far as that goes, hopefully this has helped you out, and hopefully this has helped you understand how this stuff works. And if you do find this interesting, or if you did learn something or whatever, then go ahead, leave a like, leave a subscribe, and share. And also check out my other videos. Check out my all my playlists. I got hacking playlists and other stuff Also, please feel free to check out the PayPal donations, the Patreon campaign, the Maker Studio stuff, the Cafe Press stuff. And by the way, I don't exactly control the prices on the Cafe Press. I actually get very minimum. I get like $1 per some of those things. Cafe Press mostly controls the prices of most of those shirts and stuff. So keep that in mind. But as far as that goes, if you didn't like it, go ahead and leave a dislike, but tell me why, and that way it can help me fix up future videos. But again, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share, and check out my other videos, and share my channel, which is most important to get more eyeballs on this stuff. And hope you have a great day. Again, this has been CraigBennettII from TechFusionUp.com.